All right, David Stokes is with us from the Show Me Institute. John Deal, House Majority Leader, and Jane Duker, former Chief of Staff to Governor Holden. Good morning, Jane Duker.
Good morning.
What do you got?
Well, I want to talk about the kids in Normandy. And so, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum of deciding whether transfers are a good idea for a long-term policy, and there's a lot of debate on that. And the legislature spent a lot of time on it, and experts all over the state have been debating it, and it is the right debate the state needs to be having. So I'm thrilled that education has moved to the front of the line. However, the kids that are in the Normandy School District just got railroaded. And, so last year, the state board decides that school district is unaccredited. Okay, they didn't meet the standards, and they decide. Everybody knew what the law said at the time. The Supreme Court upheld these transfers. There was no dispute as to what was going to happen when they made the decision. And by the way, the state board decides when and how that decision is made. They'd make the decision and say, okay, this is unaccredited, which then allows all these kids to transfer.
About 2,000 of them.
Yes, and we all read about it. We all saw it. Okay, so then now we find out that the district, obviously after all the transfers and you drain all the tuition out, that, they were having financial troubles. We got them through the last school year. But they decided they were going to do a state takeover of the board, which they've done before. They've done it. They did it, for example, in the city of St. Louis. But what they did was they voted to say they weren't going to give the school district an accreditation status. They didn't say they're unaccredited. They didn't say they're accredited, which means that law allowing transfers no longer applies, which I can't even imagine. So whether you agree that, and I don't agree draining all the financial resources out of these school districts.
Hold on a second. So they ruled it's in limbo.
It's in limbo.
Which means these kids then are not allowed to transfer out.
Well, under the statute, correct. It only applies to unaccredited districts. So when they lost their accreditation status completely, then the trigger for transfers no longer applies. So the problem comes in now. These kids have transferred. And so now you're going to yank them back into Normandy. Now, they've tried to sort of stopgap it by saying, okay, we'll let them transfer, but we're going to limit the amount of tuition, which is $7,500 a kid, no transportation, and the receiving district gets to decide, which is sort of what the people were arguing in the Turner case. Well, we get to decide if these kids get out. And I just think that these kids, and some of these kids transferred from another unaccredited district to get to Normandy in the first place. So we've got kids that are going to be transferred 3 times. I get it. I understand that maybe transfers isn't a long-term solution and you don't want to drain resources out of this district. But you've whipsawed these kids. These kids are the political pawn, and I think it's horribly unfair. I think if the state wanted to do this, then they need to pay the freight, leave the money in Normandy, but then pay the freight for these kids to transfer because you started it. If you started it, you got to finish it.
Before we open it up to the rest of the panel, who's at fault here? Is this the law passed by the legislature? Is this Nixon's people? What's going on here?
I think it's the state board. I think, and I understand that it's a horrible job, and I don't, but I also think this was foreseeable. Everybody talked about this when you declared that district unaccredited. These were foreseeable consequences. The tuition leaving, all of this. And I think that they caused chaos in order to try to get a bill they wanted. When they did or didn't get what they wanted, now they're sort of doing what they want. And I just think that they need to set policy on a long-term basis, and they need to do it. But leave these kids, let them finish what they started.
David Stokes.
Well, I just really hope that the districts that took the transfer kids this year will continue to take them. And I think that the approximately $7,500 fee, I think it's fair that the state board set a cap on the fee. It was crazy that, Clayton or somebody could charge $17,000 or whatever it was. So I think a cap is fine, and I think $7,500 is enough that many of them will continue to take. If they reject the kids, it's not just, they may say it's because they don't have enough money, but it probably won't actually be for that reason. So I really hope, because I agree with Jane, and my colleague James Schultz has a lot of great writing on this transfer at showmeinstitute.org, but I just hope that these kids are able to continue. I hope the transfer program is able to move forward, because the kids who transferred, most importantly, are getting a better education. They're going to better schools. They're getting a better education, and the effects on their long-term lives could be tremendous. And if they're just brought back into an unaccredited or no status at all now district and changed around and transferred back and forth, it's just going to be a nightmare.
John,
I agree. Our first thing we always have to look at on this are the children, okay, and the children. I was talking to someone about this the other day. There's always a 3, 4, 5, 10-year plan on how to make something better, which is good because you do need to.
You got to have it, right?
You got to have short, intermediate, long-term planning. But what all those plans always do is seem to ignore the present.
Right.
And the reality is you have several classes of students here who've been, for lack of a better term, jerked around by a power struggle. And last year, whether it was for better or for worse, these kids were able to transfer. They elected to transfer. They did it under a law which was in place and enforced by the Missouri Supreme Court. And I think they should be allowed to finish that out. Now, to David's point, which I think is wise, the money is something which ought to be something which is reasonable, which is something which truly reflects the cost of educating the student in the district that they're going to. Okay, and
the bottom line is the receiving district decides.
Well, but now going back a second here, Riverview Gardens fails. All those kids end up going to the Normandy schools, which then brought the Normandy schools down. So Normandy didn't get to decide.
It was Wellston. It was Wellston.
Okay. Wellston.
But Normandy didn't get to decide which students to take, which students not to take.
They took them.
They didn't get a choice of this, and so now. Right. Now they've been quote unquote infected with these troubled kids, and so now they're the ones who are causing the pain. That was a well-run school district until they had to then accept all these people.
The state board broke it, and that's the thing. I mean, this was all foreseeable, and at the short term, it's for lack of a crappy short-term plan, and this was all foreseeable. And so now you have kids that came from Wellston, went to Normandy, may have gone to, let's say, Afton or somewhere, and now got to go back to Normandy. I mean,
Jane, also too, what's a little bit irritating and frustrating about this is the law that they're using now to justify the action that they're taking.
They could have used it a year before.
And we talked about it on the show a year ago, was in place and was effective last August, which was before the present school year started. Now, whether it's right or wrong to interpret the law or to use it that way, they could have used that law at the beginning of last school year and not jerked these students around.
Near the end of June, and these kids have no idea where they get to go.
So the kids who transferred out, they're making it virtually impossible to get to get out again because of transportation costs.
Well, it's voluntary, and it's voluntary. I mean, under the law, the statute, it was not voluntary. If you are declared unaccredited, the transfer is not voluntary. These kids go.
Sounds to me like some parents going to bring a lawsuit.
They already have.
Okay.
I mean, they're already challenging the takeover, and this will be another issue, I'm sure. But the problem is that litigation is going to take 2 or 3 years, and these kids only get to go to sophomore year 1 year. And I'm worried about the kids right now that are in this. You gave it to them. You got to finish what you start. I don't know if transfers is a good idea long term, but you started it with these kids, and if they want it, they're entitled to have it.
That's Jane. Do you want to finish? Do you want to end?
We just had one real quick thing. Let's remind people that the nightmare scenarios predicted by opponents of the transfer program with tons of kids just making it impossible. That didn't happen.
Well, we don't know yet.
The school districts that took kids were able to each set a set number, and those kids went to the schools and they got better education. They were not behavioral. You don't know that,
and the experiment's not over. But let them finish.
But the nightmare scenarios predicted didn't come true in the first year of the transfer program.
In 1 year.
And you brought up numerous times that the city of St. Louis schools don't have an accreditation, or they're partially accredited,
provisionally,
which is just a made-up term.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's in the statute now, but when they were declared provisional, it was made up. And the tuition limit is made up.
Well, this clearly is the pretense is the right word, but it's really the precursor to what the state board is going to plan to do with St. Louis and Kansas City if they don't turn the situation around in those two districts.
That's John Deal, David Stokes, Jane Duker. The board meeting continues on KTRS.
9:32 here at the Big 550 KTRS. We got to check out traffic with David Morrison at the Golden Oak Lending Traffic Center. Let's get a check of traffic in just a minute. Let's head to weather with Fox 2 meteorologist Angela Huddy.
Another warm and humid afternoon, temps into the 90s. Watching a few clouds build up, an isolated shower or thunder shower possible as we go into the afternoon and early evening. A little bit of a south to southwest breeze. 76 the low tonight. Same scenario tonight into tomorrow. Scattered showers, maybe an isolated thunder shower possible, and we'll keep at least a slight chance in for Saturday and Sunday too. High temperatures should stay near 90 degrees into next week. I'm Fox 2 meteorologist Glenn Zimmerman for the Big 550 KTRS.
It's 84 and mostly cloudy right now. Let's head back to the Golden Oak Lending Traffic Center with David Morrison.
Everything's still doing fine on pretty much all the area roadways. The only issue we've got is 44 westbound right at 141. There's a crash that's blocking off the right lane. Stop-and-go traffic begins at Bowles. Remember, the Phillies in the cards today at Busch Stadium, or tonight actually at 7:15. Definitely watch out for heavy traffic both before and after the game. From the Golden Oak Lending Traffic Center, I'm David Morrison on the Big 550 KTRS.
Each and every weekday morning at 6:50, Scott Crothers from Stifel Nicholas gives us insights into the financial markets and investing. To get your own personal financial review, call him at 314-292-6201 and tune in weekday mornings at 6:50 on the Big 550 KTRS.
Holland is hiring in your area. Local and regional drivers are wanted. Go to www.hollandregional.com/careers to see the opportunities and apply. Holland's local drivers are paid hourly and receive overtime after 8 hours per day. And they're also home daily. Regional drivers are paid by the mile, working only 5 to 6 days per week, and are provided company-paid hotels while on the road. Full-time driver benefits include company-paid health insurance. Drivers must be at least 21 years of age, have a CDLA with 1 year or 50,000 miles experience, and have a tanker and hazmat endorsement. Come find your new direction at Holland.